Please be seated. The court is now in session. Today, the chamber will continue to hear the testimony of the witness Steve Heather, who will be questioned by Kills and Pond's defense. And before we proceed, the grantee, Mrs. Chakraborty, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to today's proceeding? Chakraborty, Mr. President, for today's proceeding, all parties to this case are present. And on the side note, Nuji is present in the holding cell downstairs, pursuant to the decision of the trial chamber regarding his health. The witness, Stephen Heather, is already in the courtroom, ready to continue his testimony. Thank you. President, thank you. We would like now to give the floor to Kills and Pond's defense to continue putting questions to the witness. And before you proceed, counsel, I'd like to give the floor to the witness first, and then the prosecution.
Very quickly, two offers. If you want me to finish clarifying the factual bases for what I wrote in my book about the relationship between Vietnamese communist doctrine and the communist practice of the two men who are on trial today, I'm happy to do that. Second, if Xylab can pull up the full original text of the quotes that appear in the footnote to Ben Kiernan's book, I'm also happy to try to clarify the circumstances surrounding their authorship, and in particular the factual bases as in the facts available to me at that time for the views, the alternative views, I'm quoted correctly, I think, as having stated according to those footnotes. Just offers.
President, thank you, Mr. Steve Heather. And we would like to inform you that we would not like to hear further complimentary addition from you. And we kindly like to advise you that as a witness, please respond directly to the question that is put to you and limit your reply to the context of that question too, and that is to avoid the time consumption. And as you know, the time allocation to the parties is very limited and strict. So please make your response precise and brief. And the prosecution, you may now take the floor.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honours. Good morning to fellow counsel. Mr. President, I rise at this stage just to say that we have been undertaking a review of the witness statements that it appears that the Khieu Samphan defence team may seek to rely on today. And it appears to us, but we're willing to be corrected, but to take just two examples, E3/392 and E3/393 are not in the revised 12 annex. As has been stated by the court on many occasions, any document to be referred to must be on a party's own Rule 80 list or another party's list. As I say, these, and I anticipate perhaps other documents, are not in revised Annex 12, to whose admission the defence objected. And I would like, please, a direction to the defence in respect of every witness statement they refer to before putting any contents of any witness statement to clarify in open court directly to all the parties and the trial chamber whether the document they seek to rely on is in a Rule 80 list. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honours. Good morning to all of the parties. I feel that the prosecutor's remark is a bit premature, I should say, but I will make sure to indicate what the status of my documents. But right now, right off the bat, the numbers mentioned by the prosecutor don't mean anything to me, but I think there will be no problem, and I am sure that the prosecutor will be mindful and interrupt me if it's necessary. So, with your leave, Mr. President, I would like to start.
President, yes, you may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Header. Let me introduce myself. My name is Anta Gise. I am the international co-counsel of Mr. Khieu Samphan, and it is in this capacity that I'm going to put to you a few questions today. You understand that you are appearing before us as a witness and not as an expert, and therefore this limits us in the kinds of questions that we will put to you. And it is within these strict confines that I will try to clarify certain points and go over certain documents with you. When I will ask you questions on interviews, generally speaking, I will ask you please to answer us on the basis of what you experienced directly in Cambodia, what you personally saw, or what information you personally gathered during your research. whether it be for your articles or whether it be in the context of your work here at the OCIJ or at the OCP. So each time, please give us a factual base, no opinions, simply facts based on elements that you personally came into contact with. I will tell you, maybe I will forget this in some of my questions, and I will have to remind you, but please be aware that that will be the guideline. So, my first series of questions relates to when you were in Cambodia between 1973, May 1973, and 11 April 1975. You said that you were in Phnom Penh then, and you said on the hearing of 11 July 2013, a little bit after 1:45 in the afternoon, that you had arrived when the bombing had officially ended in August 1975. Did I understand correctly what you said? And do I understand that you arrived in Phnom Penh in May 1973, that is to say before the end of the U.S. bombing?
Yes, with one clarification that when I arrived, the bombing was still going on. My recollection is that by that time, or shortly thereafter, the U.S. Congress legally ordered a halt to the bombing, but the actual end to the bombing didn't occur until the 15th of August, 1973.
So I understand that did you personally see any bombing or experience any?
I can't say that I was in the immediate proximity of the dropping of bombs by the U.S. Air Force before that halted in August 1973, wrong century. But if you lived, as I did, as I described, on the southwest outskirts of Phnom Penh, when, in particular, B-52 strikes were being carried out, the shock waves of the bombing were sufficient to sway the house in which I was living. So, and the sound of the bombing, both southwest of town and north of town and south of town and east of town, was all very audible. One could sit on the top of the Monorome Hotel on Monorome Boulevard, then, I forget what it's called now, and from the roof one could see the flashes of the strikes occurring all directions around town, particularly at night when it was highly visible.
Thank you for this clarification. So after having known that bombing was taking place in such and such an area, were you led to travel to an area after it had been bombed? Did you notice personally what had happened in an area? Did you notice any traces of bombings in the areas you traveled to?
Since the overwhelming majority of the bombing was in areas controlled by the Khmer Rouge, I didn't visit them. And I suppose if I had, I wouldn't be here today. So the answer is no.
I would like, as of now, Mr. President, I can tell the prosecutor, and this is a small side point, that the two statements he mentioned, E3/392 and E3/393, are on the co-prosecutor's Rule 80D list on page 79 of this document, E109/4.12. So this is just to allow the prosecution to check this if necessary.
Mr. President, just so it's clear, that is not the right list. That is reference to the initial list and not to the revised list. So is it on the revised list, not the original list?
Well, second point of clarification, and then I will, of course, return to my questioning of the witness. It appears to me that the court's jurisprudence had indicated to us that in the context of our questioning, we could use all E3 documents, and that all documents that were not E3 documents, had to be placed on the parties' lists. So this is a question that I tender to the Chamber. Well, in any case, a priori, I do not intend to use these documents in the first part of my questioning. So maybe you will have the time to check during the break if this is possible. But for the moment, I will put these documents aside.
Excusez-moi.
Now, Mr. Hedder, let me please return to where we were. On the hearing of 11 July, a little bit after 2:10, you said that you were able to get military information, and you spoke about a Japanese military attaché in particular. So my question is the following. After the end of the U.S. bombing, do you know if the Lon Nol forces had an air force? Did this information coming from this military attaché or from any other source indicate to you that this could be the case?
Witness, please hold on the prosecution. You may proceed.
Mr. President, repetitious. This question was answered twice during the course of Mr. Hedder's testimony about the Lon Nol Air Force. It's repetitious. It's going to exactly the same ground that Mr. Hedder has already covered and answered. It's not clarifying, it's repeating.
Fine. Well, if the answer was already provided, fine. Well, then can you tell us which military sources spoke to you about the Lon Nol Air Force?
Well, first and foremost, officers of the Khmer Republic Air Force itself. Second, primarily U.S. military personnel attached to the U.S. Embassy previously described, and also, indeed, the Japanese military attaché, and I would add almost certainly other military attachés, particularly the Thai and the Singaporeans and the Malaysians were among those to whom I frequently spoke. My recollection is that the Japanese and the Americans had or were willing to make available the most detailed and specific information.
You also spoke to my colleague Victor Coppi about a journalist by the name of Sidney Schanberg. And you told us that you did not know him very well, but that you knew him, however. And he testified on 7 June 2013, and he spoke about a bombing of the Lon Nol forces and he mentioned this when he testified, as well as in an article that he presented to the parties. And this article is document D226/1/4/3.1. And the date is March 1 in his journal. So according to the dates that you provided to us, on March 1, 1975, do you remember any bombing on that date?
President, witness, please hold on. The prosecution, please take the floor.
Mr. President, it seems that sloppiness does not just affect one defence team. It's endemic. If a reference is being made to Sidney Schanberg's testimony, can we please have a page, an ERN, or a timing for that document, and the specific passage quoted to the witness? Secondly, if we have reference to a document, can we please have a specific passage from the document that's being put to the witness? This is the typical way in which this side questions. They package together multiple sources without giving references and then ask questions based upon it. It is imprecise advocacy. It is not advocacy which should be the gold standard for this court. I say it now so that hopefully a more professional approach can be developed. It is not enough simply to package various things together and then ask general questions. Do you remember some bombing? On which date? Of which area? At what time? It's imprecise, it's sloppy, and it should not be tolerated.
Bien.
Well, I see that the co-prosecutor is ready to object to every one of my questions. So if we're going to proceed this way, we will proceed this way. I'm aware that I have very limited time for my questioning, and I'm trying to do things the way they should be done. Now, in relation to this objection related to references, yes, I have provided the references of this document. This is the hearing of 7 June 2013, and the document is E1/20.1, and I'm speaking about document D226/1/4/3.1, and the ERN exists in English, and as all parties know, because these were notes that were provided belatedly by Mr. Schanberg, and the ERN in English is 089-8227. And the reason why I did not mention these ERNs is that I did not intend to show the document to the witness, and I was just giving these references so that the parties may know what I'm talking about and may know which period I'm talking about. We spoke at length about this issue with Mr. Schanberg, and the point of my question was just to give the references, simply to provide the context. I could have asked him, were you in Phnom Penh on March 1, 1975? Do you remember having experienced any bombing? I could have asked the question that way, and it would have been approved. So I'm trying now just to provide extra specifications, but I simply wish to inform the Chamber that I have a lot of references and that will take a lot of time. And if the co-prosecutor intends to object to each one of my questions, we won't be able to manage this today, and I won't be able to finish today if we continue in this way. So this is something I wanted to, a point I wanted to make. So, Mr. President, may I please proceed with my questioning now?
Mr. President, all I've asked for is the time reference in the transcript of Sidney Schamberg's testimony on the 7th of June, so that you know what we're talking about and we know what we're talking about. What is the time marking on Sidney Schamberg's transcript?
I will provide it to you later. I don't have it now, and I have the reference, and I gave you the English ERN, and you can refer to it. It is D226/1/4/3.1. English ERN 089822227. And now that I have provided this clarification, I will give you the date. It is 1 March 1975. And it is on March 1, 1975, that Cindy Schamberg speaks about this bombing.
Mr. President.
President, I think the prosecutor has taken many floors already, and if you keep doing that, we cannot move on this morning. Probably you think only the time is for you just to stand up and interrupt the defense counsel. Please make your point precisely and for once. And then wait for the reply from the other side, and then we will decide on that. The floor is not for you to take 3 or 4 times already just on this very issue.
Mr. President, is document D226/1/4.3.1 on any required list?
Alors là, Monsieur le Président,
I am sorry, but we have used this document in extenso during Mr. Schamberg's appearance. If the prosecutor uncovers this document, I am sorry, but his colleague will confirm to him that that document has been used extensively by the prosecutor during the questioning of the witness, and the entire chamber is aware of this. Can I proceed with my cross-examination of the witness, Mr. President, following the particular and multitude objections of the prosecutor? With the assistance of my team, the hearing of the 7th of June 2013 was at 11:32 that we raised this issue regarding Mr. Schamberg. I could have asked my question quite simply without giving any reference. I gave the reference in order to assist the parties, and yet this is posing more problems. Having made these clarifications, Mr. President, may I proceed with my questioning of the witness?
President, you may proceed.
je vous remercie.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Heder, I'm sorry for the interruption. My question to you was as follows. I do not know whether you answered it. The question was as follows. Do you recall attending on the 1st of March or at any other date? Do you recall witnessing any bombings?
Khmer Republic Air Force T-28 aircraft and some other aircraft as well, but primarily T-28s.
Je vous remercie de ces
Thank you for this clarification. I'll now go into another line of questioning. At the hearing of the 11th of July this year, you told the co-prosecutor of an intelligence report of the Khmer Republic, and it is a record, and it's in English, at 11:15 and 14 seconds. I want to point out that it is in English because at the time, Mr. President, there were translation problems in French, and that is why I would like us to revisit that transcript at that particular time. Witness, you referred to an intelligence report of the Khmer Republic, which presented an organization chart of the communist movement, and in particular, a military organization chart.
Je retrouve
The passage, which I will unfortunately quote in English, is as follows, and I want everyone to be able to follow it. That's why I'm quoting it in English.
donc sur le procès verbal.
On the draft transcript in English, page 82, shortly before 2:15, the prosecutor put a specific question to you, and he asked you whether you recall the military structure at the time, and this was your answer. And for the interpreters, unfortunately, I will read out the transcript in English with my poor accent.
Well, in at least some of these materials, Salot-Sar was at the top. And that was something which there was some dispute within the intelligence community about who he was and how accurate that was. But after the reporting done by Aung Thum, who had been on the fringe of the party apparatus and then defected to the Khmer Republic side, did some reports for Khmer Republic intelligence, and then published a book where he identified Salot-Sar as the head of the communist movement. That was pretty much accepted in the intelligence community. For Nat, as it was a special zone, my recollection was, in those days, Van Vet was identified as the head of the special zone. But one of his other aliases, I think Sotrot, name was used in the documents. Certainly, Tamok was mentioned. In the east, certainly Sopim was mentioned as the head of the zone. I think by one of his aliases, Vanna, Sovanna, and the other zone secretaries, for the most part, were accurately identified. Mum in the northwest, and so on. Fin de citation.
End of quote. Mr. Witness, for a start, do you recall this passage in French? It was not translated into French. I would like us to revisit what you stated in your answer, notably that Salot-Sar was at the head of that organization chart. Do you recall what his revolutionary alias was?
In that document, I don't think any alias was given, and certainly not the alias by which he was subsequently publicly known. Pol Pot was not in that document. I can confirm that I never heard of that alias until the name was made public once the regime was in power. So before April 1975, I certainly never heard that alias applied to anyone.
Et vous avez
And you stated in your answer that The matter was discussed as to whether Salazar was at the head of the movement or not. Why were there such discussions? What was cause for concern for the intelligence community at the time, in your opinion?
Attempts at analysis of, or the gathering and analysis of intelligence about the leadership of the Khmer Rouge went through several stages, as it was described to me by people in the embassies who had access to intelligence data. And initially, for example, in the U.S. Embassy, it was insisted that those known as the three ghosts, which included, of course, Kyo Samphan, were in fact dead, and that therefore the photographs that had been produced of them after March 1970, presenting them in formal terms as leadership of the Grunk and the Funk, were fakes. Subsequent to that, eventually it seemed to be accepted that they were not dead but alive. And then there was some discussion, again as reported to me, about whether or not they held positions of real power. And there wasn't certainty, as I recall, in these circles about that issue. And there was also a raging debate which related to this question of who was in charge at the very top, about the extent of Vietnamese and, to a certain extent, Chinese influence. And the debate was essentially about whether or not the Khmer Rouge were independent of Vietnamese communist leadership. And for a long time, I was told, CIA, to cite one intelligence agency, continued to insist that the Khmer Rouge movement was under Vietnamese communist control and leadership. I think that view, as I recall from what I was told, was disputed by some of the analysts on the ground, as often occurs in intelligence situations. In my experience from what I've been told about such things, there's often a split between those who do the actual analysis on the ground and the higher-ups in the organization. But increasingly, as I indicated in my previous testimony, it seemed to be accepted first that the three ghosts were not the top leadership. Second, that the top leadership included the likes of people like Salot Sar, Nguyen Chia, Da Mok, Vorn Vet, Goi Tuan was also frequently mentioned. And increasingly, at least, I was told within the U.S. Embassy intelligence community, it was believed that the Khmer Rouge were not under Vietnamese control. There were theories that Ieng Sary, because he was a Khmer Krom, was therefore under Vietnamese control, or Son Sen, because he was Khmer Krom, was under Vietnamese control. Nobody seemed to have a clear idea who Salot Sar was. There was some discussion of Nguyen Chia. But from what I heard at the time, it seemed that this was pretty much sheer speculation. So those were, as I recall it, the terms of the debate. And I recall it rather specifically because I don't remember whether I talked about this in my previous testimony, but one of the stories I was asked to do immediately before and immediately after 17 April 75 by my Time magazine editors in Saigon, Hong Kong, and New York was specifically about the Khmer Rouge leadership issue. And I wrote a piece which took the position that the best available evidence in the non-legal sense of the word indicated to me that the Khmer Rouge leadership was not under Vietnamese control, that this was an independent political organization pursuing its own path. And that story never appeared, I was told by my senior editors in New York, because they went to CIA in Langley, and CIA in Langley told them I was wrong. Therefore, they didn't publish it. But the story was done, and it's the reason why I have some detail with regard to this debate. I went around asking people who were prepared to tell me what was going on in the intelligence community with regard to these issues. So I have a relatively clear memory of all of that.
Vous avez évoqué.
I'm going into another line of questioning, and we will return to what you learned at the time and what you learned subsequently in the course of your investigations on leadership. But at the hearing of the 10th of July at about 14 hours 08, the co-prosecutor asked you about an interview you had with Chun Prasit, and he referred to document E3/22 titled Cambodian Communism and the Vietnamese Model. And when you referred to that matter at 14 hours 08, the co-prosecutor referred to footnote number 69, in which you make reference to an interview with Chun Prasit on the 8th and 9th of September 1978 in New York. And at 14 hours 10, perhaps I should repeat my references. It does not appear to ring a bell to you. At the hearing of the 10th of July at 14 hours 08, in answer to a question put to you by the international co-prosecutor, you referred to an interview with Chun Prasit. Do you recall that interview?
There were several interviews I did with Chun Prasit. What I'm shaking my head about is the date that you mentioned. I don't think it's possible that I interviewed him in 1978. I don't recall whether he was a part of the Ieng Sari delegation that I met in New York in late 78. But if I did, if he was, I can't imagine, based on my current recollection, that I interviewed him about something like that at that time. Subsequently, yes, maybe 1998 maybe there's a typo somewhere in the chain of transmission of this citation.
Peut-être en effet, puisque je.
Perhaps, in fact, since I am referring to a document in French and is New York 1997, I will cross-check this matter later. You state that, according to what you remember, you met Mr. Chun Prasit after the Democratic Kampuchea era. Is that correct? I will come back on this matter with the proper references if what I'm giving is not correct. I want you to recall what you said during the hearing on that day at 14 hours 08, 14 hours 10, during that interview, which is dated later. You stated that you paraphrased what Prasit said regarding what you said, Kyo Sampan, and you said he was like a private secretary of Noon. And when you were questioned by the co-prosecutor, you stated that I paraphrased Prasit. He said something similar, but I wouldn't swear that that was exactly the expression he used. My question to you is as follows. I am not talking of any interviews you had with him as part of your scholarly research, but as part of your work in the Office of Co-Prosecutors and the Office of Co-Investigating Judges. Did you ever hear of an interview record with Tun Prasit on the 8th of June 2009? Were you questioned on that, and did you have any access to that document?
Yes, of course, I was aware of the document. I didn't do the interview myself. My recollection is the interview was done in France by investigators of the office assigned to that task. As a matter of course, I would probably have been involved in helping work up briefing materials for those investigators. I don't have any record of any of that, obviously. And they did the interview, the PV went on the case file. I read it on the case file. I had access to the case file in those days. And I'm not really sure I have a lot more to say about it. Yes, I was aware. Yes, I was probably involved at some level in the preparatory work leading to the interview. Yes, I read it once it was done, and that's about it, really.
Oui, alors en fait, je suis désolée.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm sorry, Mr. Heder. Whenever I put questions to you, it is not necessarily to seek clarifications from you. My question is, do you recall that? You can simply say yes or no. I just want to lay a foundation for my questions. So you have agreed that you worked on that document, and with the leave of the President, may I request that, if it is possible, document E3/96 be placed on the screen. It is the interview transcript with Kim Chassit, 8 June 2009, Paris. The page of interest in me is 003422220, and the ERN in English is 00346945, and the ERN in Khmer is 0034839. To assist everyone in the courtroom, let me point out that the paragraph in this document I would like to read out is the last page. It's on the last page in French.
The President, Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Mr. President, this document was not downloaded. It was not on an email sent from the Q Sampon team at 6:40 yesterday, or on an updated email sent after that, certainly on the information that I have. So I object to this document being shown, as it's not been uploaded and we have no advance notice of it.
C'est certainement un oubli.
This is an unfortunate case of a document I forgot to place on the list. This document was not on the interface. If I may assist the parties, I don't wish to use this document later. It is indeed an E3 document referring to Tun Prasit, who was interviewed by the witness. It also refers to Mr. Kyo Sampan, so it is a document that is particularly relevant. If I didn't place it on the interface, it is because I forgot to do so, and I'm sorry about it. As Judge Cartwright said during the 3 July hearing, we should be flexible in the manner in which we use these documents, given the fact that a huge mass of documents have been presented. If the Chamber would like me to refer to this document, I would simply like to refer to a single paragraph regarding what Mr. Chun Prasit said regarding what he knew about my client's duties, and I think it is a very important point to broach in my questioning.
The President. The Chamber grant the permission for the defense to pursue on this document, because this document was awarded the E3 classification, and thus far the Chamber has been relatively flexible on this as well. So, Council, you may proceed. The President, Mr. Steve Hedder, do you have any issue or anything to say?
I've got the Khmer. In this particular instance, I'd prefer the French or even the English on my screen.
Peut-être que... On va essayer de vous imprimer.
We will perhaps try to print out a French version of the document, that is a French version of that page. If you could bear with us for some time, I will read out the passage and maybe you can refer to it later. It will enable us to gain time and perhaps look at the translation later. I have already given the ERN. The question that is raised.
Vous voulez intervenir?
Would you like to say something?
Bien, je poursuis.
So let me proceed then. The question that was put to Mr. Chun Prasit during that interview was as follows. Question. Did you know Kyo Sampan? Answer. I do not remember if I knew him when I was in France. I heard his name in Cambodia when he launched the magazine L'Observateur. I occasionally published articles in this magazine under the pen name San. Kyo Sampan had the reputation of being a man of integrity. I met him a few times in Phnom Penh. He was the trade minister and a member of parliament. He had a political career under both Sihanouk and Pol Pot. He held a doctorate in economics. I do not know if he was a member of the Central Committee, but I know that he was president of the Presidium. Prior to 1975, he was Deputy Prime Minister of the GRUNC and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, a bogus title because Pol Pot was the actual commander. Also during the same period, when he traveled abroad, it was Ieng Sary who exercised power, while Kyo Sampan was the head of delegation. When a delegation was headed by Ieng Sari, it was he who had the real power. End of quote. Having read out this passage to you, I will give you my copy in French with the assistance of the court officer.
Première question avant que le document vous...
First question before you receive the document. Do you recall whether that was indeed the document you consulted when you were working at the ECCC?
I'm not sure what you mean by consulted. I saw this document, but I don't think I had any role in analyzing this particular document or otherwise its processing.
Well, when I said consulting, I meant examining. Well, my question now is going to be focused on the substance of what is said by Mr. Chun Prasit. We spoke about the intelligence report on the Army's organization chart earlier. And in this statement, Mr. Chun Prasit explains that the rank of Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces was a bogus rank. Does that correspond to the factual elements that you might have gathered, or to the information that you might have received, whether it be while you were in Cambodia or whether it be later on in your research at the OCIJ or at the OCP, or in your factual research for your own personal works?
Yes.
Je passe maintenant.
Now I would like to turn to another point. I'm sorry, another point regarding this point that you were not sure that Chun Prasit had used Nguyen's personal secretary, which you brought up when you were questioned on 10 July last by the co-prosecutor. Do you have any other factual elements indicating that Khieu Samphan had been the personal secretary of Nguyen?
To my recollection, that's the only specific assertion of that alleged fact, if you will, that purported fact that I'm aware of. But there could be others, but that's the only one that I can currently think of.
Now, another topic. Mr. Heder, you said on 11 July at around 2:20, when you were answering the co-prosecutor again, you spoke about the radio broadcasts that you heard, and you spoke in particular about the voice of the Funk. So a little bit past 2:20, you say, and I quote, free translation, from time to time, radio broadcasts were presented as broadcasting Khieu Samphan's name or someone else with a name. But most of the time it was an anonymous speaker speaking, end of quote. So my question is, since you said that you frequently examined the FBIS reports, in these reports was a distinction made between the moments when it was supposedly Khieu Samphan's voice and when it was an anonymous speaker. When you would read the FBIS reports, could you detect the difference between both voices being broadcasted?
Yes, normally it was specified in a heading to the report.
Et
And when a statement of Kyo Sampon was read at length, did the anchorman or the broadcaster say that we are going to now hear a statement by Kyo Sampon, or were things not said so specifically?
I don't recall instances in which someone introduced the speaker and then the speaker spoke. Either there was a headline specifying that the speech was a speech of someone, for example, Kyo Sampon, or alternatively, there was an editorial addition by the FIBIS monitors and editors indicating, as I said, read by announcer, recorded voice of Kyo Sampon, and I can't speak to how it was that they made that decision, how they reached that conclusion. But it was a standard part of the added editorial comments of either the monitors or their editors at FBIS.
Thank you for this clarification. Now I would like to turn to another topic. At the hearing of 11 July 2013 at around 10 past 10, when you answered a question from the prosecution, you said, when describing the implementation of the policies of the party, you said the following, free translation, in interviews, people described the official policy as being such as was announced here in the documents, but at the same time, during the interviews, the people often said that the official policy and the official organization did not operate as they were expected to operate on paper. So I just wanted to remind you of this statement in order to compare it to a passage from your long article, Re-Evaluation. And let me give you the references of the document. E190.1.3.98, corrects the interpreter. And the title is the following: Re-Evaluation or Reassessment of the role played by the senior leaders and the local cadres in the crimes committed in Democratic Cambodia, Cambodian responsibility in a comparative perspective. So I don't know if you still have the document with you. Okay, I will then ask the court officer, please, I'm sorry, court officer, I'm going to have you work a bit today, but...
je remets un classeur.
So let me give you a binder.
Court officer, yes, you can go and get a document from the council.
Pour la Chambre et les parties, je remets un classeur.
I am just providing now a binder in which there is this document, Pol Pot and Kyo Sampon. This is document D366/7.1.14. And the article in question is reassessing. And the index is E190.1.398. These documents are in English, and they're... So the segment I'm interested in is at ERN, English, 00661462 on to 63. French 00792 on to the following page, and in Khmer is 00830-768 on to the following page as well. So in French it's on page 9, and this is a paragraph in which you describe the new people. It's a rather lengthy quote, so I'll try to speak slowly for the interpreters. This is what you say, free translation. In order to make of the new people a stable component of a monolithical block of solidarity with the state revolutionary power, the local cadres were instructed to act towards the evacuees in an open-minded way by demonstrating flexibility and indulgence towards them, and by considering them in no case as prisoners of war. They also had to fight against intolerance between the old people and the new people by making them work side by side in an atmosphere of solidarity and happiness. So let me stop here to specify that there are many, many quotes, but I will return to these quotes and to the footnotes later. But let me just read out this paragraph at length. Now I will continue. They had to improve the standard of living of the new people to prove that this regime was also theirs, and to pay attention to the fact that the old people welcome them and share the ground, the cattle, and the food. The old people should not take advantage of the work of the new people, but support them, supporting those who have just arrived in the countryside with only their bare hands, proving that they were entirely open to the newcomers. The new people and the old people had to therefore live and work and study, have fun, enjoy prosperity, or suffer hunger together in the cooperatives, in a spirit of solidarity. The cadres were warned. The new people had to see that the revolution was really practicing economic equality. This policy was transmitted to the local bodies of the parties under the following instructions. The evacuees must be considered as being part of the Cambodian people and not as being enemies. Therefore, it is necessary to provide food to them, as well as water, as well as shelter, kill animals, provide food to the evacuees, and rice coming from the cooperatives. End of quote. In this paragraph, as I said, you see that there is an important number of quote-unquote quotes, and as a footnote, you indicate some of your sources. Given that you have worked on the basis of Khmer documents, and you translated these documents, that is my first question.
Yes, I've worked from the original Khmer, made my own translations, and incorporated those quotes from my translations of those original Khmer documents.
Alors.
Well, the footnotes forming the base of the paragraph I just read out to you go from note 31 to note 41, and I'm going to since I want to understand how you work with certain documents, and when I find what I think is the ground of this footnote in the context of this document E3 put before the Chamber, I would like to have, therefore, the leave to show these documents to Mr. Heder for him to confirm that he did indeed work on this document in order to draft this paragraph.
Le premier document.
The first document that I believe we found in the case file is document E3/216. And in your footnote, you say, and in English, and this is, I will quote it in English, this is footnote 31.
(1975). Je souhaiterais donc
I would like, therefore, to please provide this document in Khmer to Mr. Heder, because he said that he worked on this document in its Khmer version, for him to become aware of this document and to confirm to us that he did work with this document to draft this paragraph.
avec l'aide.
President, yes, you may do so. Court officer, could you hand the document from the council to the witness?
Je vous laisse le temps de le comprendre.
So I will give you the time to become familiar with it again. But I will let you know already that I simply want to be sure that this is the document you used when you drafted the paragraph I just quoted. Do you need more time to...
Yes, it's the same document. I note, however, that this version appears to be incomplete. It ends on page 7 with a new heading for which there is no subsequent text. I don't recall that the document upon which I worked, or from which I worked, was incomplete. So there may be additional text in the document from which I worked, which doesn't appear here.
D'accord.
Fine. My question is the following. Based on what you indicated in this paragraph, we can agree that the quoted passages are translations of what you found in Khmer in documents coming from the Democratic Kampuchea regime, such as this document E3/216.
Yes, documents that came to me either via DC Cam or in some instances David Chandler.
You also mentioned in note 32 a document known as notes from Democratic Kampuchea. So my question is are these the famous notes of cadres that you spoke about when you answered the questions put to you by the prosecution?
Yes.
Dans la suite,
And in the further footnotes, at note 33, and here again I must quote it in English.
document number 3, examination of the graphs on and the implementation of the political line on restoring the economy and setting up national construction in every domain. Je repasse en français.
Now back to French. Dated 19 September 1975. Do you remember this document? And is this document also a document given to you by DC Cam or by David Chandler?
Yes and yes.
En ce qui concerne
Now, regarding note 34, in French, this is a report of the visit of the Standing Committee. So we agree that this is the same document being referred to in note 31, or is this a different document?
Same.
concernant la
Now, note 35, and I'll quote in English again.
The great victory of 17 April 1975 was the victory of solidarity and unity with our Cambodian people and population. Cambodian Front. Et je repasse en français.
Now back to French. August 1975. Here again, is this document a document that was given to you by DC Cam and or by David Chandler? And I haven't found it on the case file.
I believe this document was among the scattered collection of party documents that was at the Dual Slang Genocide Museum, and of which I either got a duplicate original or a photocopy sometime between 1980 and 1989, but I suspect 1980, 1981. I think the same document is also in the possession of Philip Short, either, again, an original or a photocopy. This one, looking at it, probably a photocopy, because that would explain why the pagination is missing. If the photocopy was done quickly in a situation where there was poor photocopy facility available, could have been cut off during the photocopying in haste. So probably in this instance not an original but a photocopy.
Now, note 36. Well, we haven't found it, but it's the same question, and I'll quote this note in English again.
the bright future of the new Kampuchea's economy, Kampuchean Front, et je repasse en français.
Back to French. August 1975. So it's the same kind of document as the document you mentioned. That is to say, a document that was in this scattered collection where there were no page numbers because there was a problem with the photocopying machine. Now, let me move on to note 37. And I will quote in English again.
Cambodian youth must forge and refashion themselves in the movement to strengthen and expand production cooperatives in jeunesse révolutionnaire.
In revolutionary youth. So a priori, this note 37 has an E3 number, and with the President's leave, may we provide to Mr. Heder the Khmer copy so that he can confirm that he found the references for this part of his article in this document with the assistance of the court officer, of course.
Yes, you may do so. Court officer, could you deliver the document from the counsel for the witness examination?
Je vous demande de...
So please go over this document again and let us know if you indeed worked with this document.
Yes.
Could I just ask for the E3 number, please?
E3729.
I had indicated it, but I'll repeat it. E3/729.
Je passe maintenant.
Now let me move on to note 39. I will skip note 38 because I'm not sure that I have it copied. Well, I will speak about note 39 first, and I will get back to note 38 later. And in note 39, you mention a priori document E3/750. And with the leave of the President, may we please provide this document to him again to make sure that he did indeed work on the base of this document.
Je suis désolé, Monsieur l'huissier.
I apologize, court officer.
Yes, you may proceed.
Est-ce que vous reconnaissez ce document?
Do you recognize this document?
There seems to be some discrepancy. Doesn't seem to be the same document. Unless... Yes. Well, it's in the table of contents. I'm trying to leaf through to find whether it's actually in the photocopy you gave me. it's there.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you for specifying this. We haven't found note number 40, and indeed in note 41 you quote, and you already referred to this when you were answering the co-prosecutor as well as the civil parties. You speak about the interviews you had with the refugees at the Cambodian-Thai border. This is part of the sources that you used to draft your article.
Vous confirmez, nous sommes bien d'accord.
You confirm, we agree.
C'est la note.
The next document is 38. I was not able to show you in Khmer, and it is E3747 with the President's leave and the assistance of the court officer. I would like Mr. Ede to be shown this document so that he can confirm that that is indeed the document referred to in footnote 38. I'm sorry, I am overworking the court officer.
The President, you may proceed.
Est-ce que vous reconnaissez ce document?
Do you recognize this document? Is that indeed the document you used when you were drafting your article, and specifically the passage we are referring to?
I'm sorry, which footnote are we talking about?
40. Non, pas 40 parce que on l'avait.
Not 40. I am now talking of footnote 38, which was not available. It is footnote 38.
Monsieur le Président,
It's not the same document.
c'est pas le même document?
No, it's
Not the same document?
me is number 8, August 77. The one cited in the footnote is special number October, November 75. So it's the wrong document entirely. And while I've got the mic, the document number 6 cited in footnote number 40 that you said you couldn't identify, that's the same document as is cited in full in footnote 29.
Merci de ces informations.
For this information. I am ending this line of questioning, Mr. President. I have only one more question, and then we can take our break. We are agreed that the instructions you refer to in the paragraph I have just read out to you, the paragraph in your article, these are instructions you found in various Democratic Kampuchea documents and which you cited. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, to be specific, various Communist Party of Kampuchea documents, one front document, and then there's the one interview in addition. But yes, overall, yes.
Monsieur le Président, je souhaite passer.
Mr. President, I would like to go into another line of questioning, perhaps we should take our break now.
The President. Thank you. The time is now appropriate for adjournment. The chamber shall adjourn now and resume at 5 to 11. Court officer is instructed to assist the witness during the break and have him return to this courtroom by 5 to 11. The court is now adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ